I woke to the sound of a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The room was dark, a velvet sort of dark, the kind that swallows reason. My first thought was that the sheets felt wrong. Too smooth, too expensive, the air too still. Then came the second thought, colder. I wasn't alone. There was a man lying beside me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I listened to the low rhythm of his breathing, the whisper of fabric when he turned his head. My pulse started hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was supposed to be in room 412 of the Meridian Hotel. I remembered the hallway, the faint gold carpet, my exhaustion after 36 straight hours chasing a crooked senator through interviews and rain. I'd staggered into the elevator. The numbers had blurred. And now this. My phone glowed faintly on the nightstand. I reached for it, but a hand caught my wrist. His voice was rough silk. Careful, Bella. You move like that again and I might think you're trying to steal from me. I turned my head. For a moment I couldn't see him clearly, just the shadow of a jaw, the gleam of eyes like smoke catching light. When the city's neon flickered through the curtains, I saw enough. Tall, bare-chested, a sprawl of black ink tattoos across golden bronze skin, lines that curved over muscle like a map drawn by a lunatic artist. He wasn't groggy. He wasn't surprised. He looked like a man entirely in control of the world, including me. Where the hell am I? I demanded, wrenching my wrist free. Who are you? He smiled, slow, deliberate. You tell me. You walked in here. The memory hit me like a flash. 4th floor. Room 421 looked like 4 and 12 in the half-light. The keycard must have worked because some hotel genius hadn't reprogrammed it yet. I had wandered into the wrong room, collapsed on the first bed I saw, thinking I'd die of fatigue before sunrise. I made a mistake, I said. That's all. His brows rose slightly. You made a mistake, he echoed, tasting the words like they amused him. You don't look like the kind of woman who makes small mistakes, then consider it a big one. Now move. I threw the blanket aside and climbed out of bed. I was wearing yesterday's jeans and a tank top, nothing scandalous, but his gaze made me feel suddenly, violently aware of skin, breath, pulse. I grabbed my jacket from the chair. He didn't stop looking. What's your name? None of your business. Everything that happens in my room, he said, is my business. Something in the way he said it, quiet, edged with authority that didn't need volume, made the air feel thinner. I stepped toward the door, reached for the handle. It didn't turn. He must have locked it from his side with a key. I spun on him. Are you kidding me? Tell me who sent you first. No one sent me. I was tired and What, do you think I'm part of some prank? He sat up slowly, the sheet falling to his waist, revealing the rest of the tattoos. Serpents, wings, Latin that I couldn't decipher. He looked at me like a puzzle he already knew he'd solve. People don't end up in my bed by accident, he said. Either you're lying, or fate's finally grown a sense of humor. Unlock the door, I said, planting my feet. Or I start screaming loud enough to bring the whole floor here. That earned a low laugh, dark and amused. You think anyone on this floor will come running? You think they'd dare? He stood, and for a moment, silence stretched between us, my fear wrestling with the refusal to show it. He was taller than I expected, the kind of height that made the room feel smaller. His body language was precise, predatory, but his eyes, God, those eyes, held something more complicated than menace. There was curiosity there, maybe even recognition. Listen, mystery man, I said, forcing my voice steady. I'm leaving. He stepped close enough for me to feel the warmth of his skin, to smell the faint burn of whiskey and cedar on his breath. Say please, the words hit like a slap. I tilted my chin up instead of flinching. I don't beg. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he reached past me, turned the lock, and opened the door a fraction. He didn't touch me, but the brush of his arm against mine was enough to send a pulse of heat straight through me. He leaned down, his voice low. You should remember, Bella. There are men in this world who would take offense at your kind of bravery. And you're one of them? He smiled again, that dangerous curve of lips. No, I'm the one they're afraid of. I stepped into the hallway before he could say another word. My knees felt unsteady, but my pride wouldn't let me run. The corridor lights burned too bright after the dim of his suite. I walked fast, every nerve alive, every thought a storm. Who was he? At the elevator, I dared one glance back. The door to room 421 was still open. He stood in the gap, watching me like a wolf debating the worth of the chase. When our eyes met, he raised 2 fingers to his temple in a mock salute. The doors slid shut between us. Downstairs, the lobby was calm. Marble, chandeliers, the faint scent of lilies masking the city outside. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined the entire encounter. That exhaustion had conjured a hallucination in designer sheets, but the tremor in my hands said otherwise. When I reached the reception desk, the clerk looked pale. Ms. Vale, he said softly. Your room, there's been a mix-up. The suite next to yours was reserved privately for Mr. Lucero. The name sent a cold ripple down my spine. Even I, who had spent years digging into scandals and skeletons, had heard it whispered. Dante Lucero, the man rumored to own half the city's underground, a ghost whose enemies disappeared and whose fortune had no visible source. I'd just spent the night in his bed. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against every instinct, I answered. A deep voice drawled, "You left too soon." My breath caught. "How did you get this number?" "I get whatever I want," he said. "And you, Arya Vale, walked into my room. That makes you interesting. I'm not your kind of interesting. We'll see." The line clicked dead. That night, long after I'd locked myself safely in my own room, the memory of his eyes kept burning behind mine. Gray, metallic, impossible to forget. I told myself I'd report the incident, that I'd never see him again. But somewhere deep down, I already knew the truth. No one just walks away from the devil. I told myself I wouldn't think about him again. But 3 days later, his eyes were still in my head. They were the kind of eyes that stayed with you after you shut the door. Cold steel rimmed with heat. Impossible contradictions. I'd spent years facing down senators, smugglers, billionaires with manicured smiles, and none of them had ever made me feel seen the way that man did in 5 seconds of silence. I hated that. I tried to drown it out with work, chasing the next lead, scribbling half-coherent notes at midnight, but my focus was fractured. My editor, Elena, noticed it instantly. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said, leaning across the cafe table where I was pretending to write. "Worse," I muttered, stirring my coffee. "I saw a man who thinks he's God." "Another politician?" "Something else entirely." She frowned, but I didn't elaborate. How could I explain that the stranger I'd stumbled upon wasn't a stranger at all, but the phantom name whispered in the city's underbelly, Dante Lucero? Even saying it felt like conjuring something. That night, my apartment felt too quiet. My instincts, those sharp little alarms that had kept me alive through every investigation, wouldn't shut up. I checked the locks twice, poured a glass of wine, told myself I wasn't waiting for a knock on the door. The knock came anyway. 3 raps, calm, controlled. I froze. The kind of silence that has weight filled the room. Against every shred of logic, I opened it. Dante Lucero stood in the hallway, dressed in black from throat to wrist, the faint glint of a watch catching the light. His presence was the same. Composed, dangerous, magnetic. My first reaction wasn't fear. It was fury. "Are you following me?" I snapped. Following implies effort. His tone was almost lazy. "I simply came to talk. You broke into my building." I walked in. He tilted his head. "Your doorman's easily convinced." "Of course he is," I muttered. "What do you want?" He stepped past me without permission, scanning my apartment as though cataloging every corner. My anger warred with the strange thrum under my skin. Adrenaline, awareness, something I refused to name. "I want to know," he said, finally turning to face me. "Why a journalist who knows how to survive would walk into my room and sleep beside me? I told you, it was a mistake. I don't believe in those." I crossed my arms. "Then believe in coincidences." He smiled faintly. No humor in it. In my world, coincidences get people buried. There it was. The reminder of who he was. What kind of power he held. But the menace in his voice wasn't the thing that made my pulse skip. It was the control. The quiet confidence of someone who'd never had to raise his voice to make the world obey. I should have been terrified. Instead, I found myself saying, "If you came here to threaten me, get in line. I've pissed off senators, billionaires, and half the city council. You're just one more." That made him laugh. Low and genuine. "You're not afraid. You don't scare me." He took a step closer. "You should be." The space between us vanished, replaced by heat, static, something electric. His nearness was suffocating. Not because he touched me, but because he didn't. Every molecule of air seemed to bend around his restraint. "Move," I said, voice thinner than I wanted. "Why?" His gaze lingered on my face like a touch. "You're the one who came to me." "I came to a bed," I shot back. "Not to you." He leaned forward, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of smoke and leather. "You say my name in your sleep, do you?" I inhaled sharply. "You're delusional." "Maybe," he murmured. "Or maybe I recognize obsession when I see it." The audacity in his tone sparked something reckless in me. "You think I'm obsessed with you? I think you're curious." He traced his eyes over me, unhurried, deliberate, not lustful, but assessing, like a chess player studying his opponent. "Curiosity kills more than fear ever does." "Then maybe I'll die interested," I said. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, predator and provocateur, neither willing to blink first. Then he reached into his coat and set something on the table. A small black tracker, the same kind I'd found on my phone days ago. "I removed this from your bag," he said. "It's not mine." I felt a jolt of cold recognition. Someone had been following me. "You searched my things?" "I protect what belongs in my orbit." His tone hardened. "Someone wanted to know where you were. That means either they're after you, or they think you're a way to reach me." "I'm not yours," I snapped. His eyes flickered, not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Amusement. You keep saying that, he said softly. But fate seems to disagree. He reached out, slow, deliberate, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His fingers didn't linger, but the touch burned anyway, as if he'd left a signature. My heart raced. My brain screamed to step back. I didn't. Tell me who planted it, I demanded. I don't know, yet. His voice lowered. But I'll find out. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. But you will. He stepped away then, heading toward the door. The sudden absence of his presence was its own kind of violence. At the threshold, he turned, the hallway light carving his features into shadow and sharpness. I'll be in touch, Arya Vale. Stay alive until then. And then he was gone. I stood in the silence he left behind, my chest rising and falling like I'd run miles. I told myself it was anger, not attraction, that made my blood pulse the way it did. Anger was easier to live with, safer, but when I closed my eyes, all I could see were those devil's eyes. Impossible to read, impossible to forget. I had the sinking feeling that I hadn't escaped his world at all. I'd been invited into it. The next morning began with silence, and then with hands that weren't mine dragging a blindfold from my face. The world snapped back in fragments, stone walls, light too bright, the metallic taste of panic. I was sitting in a chair, wrists tied to the arms with silk, not rope. A strange courtesy. My jacket was gone. My boots, too. Across the room, Dante Lucero stood like he'd been waiting all night for me to wake. His suit was charcoal, perfectly cut. No trace of the man who'd slipped into my apartment. This version was all control. The devil polished. You drugged me, I said, voice rough. He lifted a brow. You fainted. I don't faint. Then you were careless. He came closer. My men found another tracker on your phone. Someone's trying to follow you, or me through you, and you thought tying me to a chair would help? I thought it would keep you still long enough to talk. The silk tightened when I tugged. It wasn't painful, but the gesture was clear. I was in his world now, on his terms. Untie me. Not until I know why my enemies suddenly care about a journalist who doesn't know when to stay away. I told you. Wrong room, wrong time. And I told you, I don't believe in accidents. We stared at each other. His eyes were a mirror of patience and pressure. Mine, a challenge I refused to drop. Somewhere beneath the fear, a pulse of fascination burned. I hated that I felt it. Hated that he seemed to know. He circled me once. A predator studying what made its prey fight. You investigate powerful men, he said. You publish things that destroy them, only if they deserve it. Do I? You haven't made the front page yet. His voice almost smiled. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the arms of the chair, close enough that I could feel his breath on my throat. Tell me something, Arya Vale. If you found proof that I'd killed men, would you print it? Yes, his lips curved. Even if it meant dying for the headline? I'd make sure it was worth the ink. For a second, something flickered behind his calm. Admiration? Amusement? Maybe both. Then with a sharp motion, he sliced through the silk with a small blade I hadn't seen. My wrist came free. Get up, he said. I did. Slowly. My knees were steady. My heart wasn't. He handed me a glass of water, as if we were meeting for an interview instead of an interrogation. You have two choices, Arya. You can go back to your life and pretend you never met me. Or you can stay until we find out who's hunting you. I don't take orders, I said. Not from you. Not from anyone. Then take advice. Someone wants you dead. That someone might be you. If I wanted you dead, he said softly, you wouldn't be standing. A chill crawled up my spine. Still, I met his gaze. And why should I trust you to keep me breathing? He stepped closer, so close the air between us grew thin. Because I've already decided I want you alive. The way he said it, possessive, final, made something twist in my stomach. I hated the thrill that followed. That sounds like a threat dressed as protection. Maybe it is. He turned away, giving me a view of the room. Gray stone walls, minimal furniture, a window barred but open enough to let in the hum of city traffic. A safe house, a cage. You'll stay here tonight, he said. Luca will bring food. And if I refuse, then you'll still stay. My laugh came out sharp. You're unbelievable. I'm inevitable. He said it like a truth carved into bone. And for a heartbeat, I believed him. I walked to the window, testing the distance, the strength of the bars. He watched silent, as if amused by my futile audit. Planning an escape? He asked. Always. Good. His voice dropped a register. Only the clever survive around me. Something about that, an admission, a challenge, made me turn. You enjoy this, don't you? The control. I enjoy knowing who might stab me next. Do you ever stop? I asked. Ever just exist without playing war? His expression barely shifted, but I saw the crack in it, a shadow of something old, weary. Once, he said quietly. A long time ago. The answer stunned me more than any threat. I expected arrogance, not honesty. He seemed to realize it because his tone turned to steel again. "Dinner's in an hour. Eat, or don't, but you stay here." He left before I could reply. Later, Luca, the one with dark humor and soft eyes that didn't match his gun, brought food. He studied me like he couldn't decide whether to respect or pity me. "You made an impression," he said. "On your boss? On anyone who's still breathing after talking back to him. Lucky me." He set the tray down. "If you've got sense, you'll keep your head down. Dante doesn't keep many people close. The ones he does, well, they usually don't sleep easy." I looked up from the untouched food. "And you?" He smiled without mirth. "I sleep with one eye open." When he was gone, I finally sat on the edge of the bed. The walls seemed to breathe with the city outside. Somewhere beneath the fear, something else pulsed. An understanding I didn't want, that Dante's world was a gravity field, and I was already caught in its pull. I should have felt trapped. Instead, I felt awake. That night, I dreamed of iron and smoke, of eyes that looked straight through the armor I'd spent years building. I woke to find him in the doorway, watching, unreadable. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. "Couldn't decide if you're brave," he said, "or just foolish. Maybe both." He nodded once, almost approving. "Good. The brave die fast. The foolish live longer." And then softer, almost to himself. "But the ones who are both, they change everything." Before I could answer, he was gone again, leaving the scent of cold air and danger behind him. I sat there, heart still racing, and understood what frightened me most. It wasn't that Dante Lucero had caged me. It was that some part of me had stopped wanting to run. The door opened at dusk. For the first time since I'd been brought here, the room wasn't filled with shadows, but with a soft, deliberate glow. Candlelight on glass and silver. The walls that had felt like a cell suddenly looked like a stage. "Dinner?" Luca said from the doorway. His voice had the careful neutrality of someone who knew better than to question orders. Behind him, 2 guards waited, expressionless. I followed him down a hall that smelled faintly of tobacco and sea salt. Every footstep echoed against marble. At the end was a dining room that didn't belong in a safe house. It belonged in an empire. A long table, crystal glasses, a view of the river cutting through the city. And at the head of the table, Dante. He looked nothing like the man who'd tied me to a chair, or maybe that was the problem. He looked exactly like him, only sharper. Black suit, open collar, sleeves rolled to the elbows, power-dressed disease. When he saw me, he didn't smile. His mouth simply curved as if my appearance was inevitable. "Aria." He said my name like a verdict. "Sit. I'm not hungry." That wasn't a request. I sat. Not because of the tone, but because I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. The food was perfect. Roasted sea bass, lemon, wine that smelled older than I was. He poured it himself, his fingers steady, the gesture strangely intimate. For a long moment, the only sounds were silver against porcelain, and the hum of the city beyond the windows. Finally I said, "You always dine with your prisoners?" "You're not a prisoner." "Then what am I?" He met my eyes. "A mystery I'm trying to solve, or a problem you're trying to control." "Sometimes they're the same thing." I picked up my glass. "And how long do you plan to keep me here while you figure out which I am? Until I'm certain the people following you won't find you first." His calm unnerved me more than any threat could. I took a sip of wine, letting the burn steady my nerves. "You act like you care." "I act like I have reasons," he said. "Care doesn't enter into it." Liar. He looked at me over the rim of his glass, amusement flickering. "You have a dangerous habit of calling me that." "Because it's true. You could have left me alone after that night, but you didn't. You could have let me walk away after you found the tracker, but you didn't. So tell me, Dante, what do you actually want?" He set the glass down, slow and deliberate, and the space between us felt like it might ignite. "Answers. And maybe to see how far you'll go before you break." "Bad news," I said. "I don't break easily. Everyone breaks. The question is what they become afterward." The air tightened. For a moment, the noise of the city vanished. It was just us, locked in a stillness that felt more dangerous than any weapon. He leaned back, fingers steepled. "You said once that you write about powerful men. Why?" "Because they think they can't be touched. And you want to prove they can?" "I want to prove they should be." His mouth curved again. Not in mockery, but in something that looked almost like respect. "You'd have made a good soldier. I prefer fighting my wars on paper." He studied me as though committing the shape of defiance to memory. "Paper burns," he said softly, "and words don't always save you. Neither does money. Or fear." Something in his gaze shifted, sharp enough to cut. "You think I live on fear?" "I think you breathe it." He stood then, rounding the table with the unhurried gait of a man who'd never once had to hurry. I stayed in my chair. He stopped beside me, too close again, the scent of smoke and clean linen in the air. "Stand," he said. "No." He tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because every time you give an order, I want to disobey it." The laugh that escaped him was quiet and dangerous. "And every time you disobey, you remind me why I haven't let you go." He lifted my chin with one finger. The touch wasn't rough, but it carried weight, the kind that pressed into memory. "You don't know what kind of men chase me," he said. "They don't ask questions. They burn the answers. And you're what, my savior? I'm the lesser fire. I don't want either. Too late. The words hit like a door closing. Then, almost gently, he dropped his hand. Come with me, he said. I followed him through a corridor lined with old photographs. Men in suits, women in masks, a legacy of power and violence. He stopped before a reinforced glass door that opened into a narrow balcony. The city glowed below, restless and alive. Look, he said. The wind caught my hair. The skyline reflected in the river like a broken mirror. For a second, I forgot to hate him. Beautiful, isn't it? He murmured, until you remember what's beneath it. What's beneath it is me, he said. And now maybe you. I turned to face him. You think you can claim me just because I stumbled into your world? He didn't move closer, but the air between us throbbed with unspoken things. I think, he said, that whatever brought you to my door wasn't an accident. You crossed a line that doesn't erase. That's your problem, not mine. You keep saying that, he said. You'll believe it less every day. He reached into his jacket and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, grainy, taken from a distance. Me, outside my apartment, days before I met him. Someone had been watching. My stomach turned cold. Where did you get this? Delivered to my doorstep this morning, he said. Mateo's signature style. You've been marked. Mateo? I repeated. The name felt like smoke in my mouth. My brother, Dante said. The one who wants me erased. The candlelight flickered across his face. For the first time I saw exhaustion, not menace. He won't stop until one of us is dead, he said quietly. And now he knows your face. I folded the photograph slowly, my hands trembling only a little. So that's it. I'm bait. No, he said. Your leverage. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you smart. His gaze softened, and for the briefest heartbeat, there was no warlord in him, only a man who'd forgotten how to stop fighting. Eat, he said finally. Rest. Tomorrow you'll need your strength. For what? For whatever comes next. He turned to go, then paused in the doorway. And Arya, his voice was quiet, almost lost in the wind. Don't mistake curiosity for safety. I'm not safe. Not even for you. The door closed behind him with the whisper of silk. I stood there, staring at the photo until the candles burned down to shadows. I should have felt fear. Instead, what spread through me was sharper, more reckless. If I was going to be leverage in a war, then I'd learn how to pull the strings. The night didn't fall. It dropped, heavy and electric, like the city was holding its breath. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every sound in the house felt amplified. The shuffle of guards changing shifts, the faint hum of distant traffic, the memory of Dante's voice. That voice had become a gravity of its own, pulling at things inside me I didn't want to name. I stood on the balcony again, staring at the photo of myself in the envelope. The streetlight in the picture looked harmless, ordinary, but now I saw the trap hidden in it. Someone had been close enough to touch me, a noise behind me. I spun, heart slamming against my ribs. It was Luca. Sorry, he said. Didn't mean to startle you. Boss wants you in the West Wing. At midnight, he shrugged. He doesn't really keep time the way normal people do. I followed him down another corridor. Dark wood, velvet shadows, faint smell of cologne and gun oil. The house was a labyrinth, but I was starting to map it in my head. Exits, corners, cameras. I wasn't going to stay helpless here. When we reached the West Wing, Dante was waiting by a table scattered with blueprints and weapon schematics. His sleeves were rolled up again. Tattoos coiled like smoke down his arms. The light caught his eyes, silver in the reflection, not quite human. You called? I said, folding my arms. He looked up, and for once, he didn't look like a devil in control. He looked like a man standing on the edge of something. They hit one of our warehouses an hour ago. Mateo's men. He's testing how close he can get before I strike back. I glanced at the map. And you want me to care because the woman in that photo was there. Before the attack. That hit me like a bucket of ice water. What? She was spotted by my men. You don't know her? No, but I'd bet she's the one who planted the tracker you found on me. His jaw clenched. Then she's a problem. For both of us. I leaned closer, tracing the warehouse coordinates with my finger. What do you plan to do? End it. With guns and blood? With precision. The way he said it. Quiet. Absolute. Told me he wasn't exaggerating. He turned to me then. I want you to stay here tonight. No wandering. No balcony, I smirked. You think I'm going to run into your brother's arms? I think you have a habit of walking straight into chaos. He was too close again. Close enough that I could smell smoke and something darkly clean, like winter air. My pulse stuttered in a way that made me angry. I stepped back. Don't flatter yourself. I don't do damsel in distress. His mouth tilted into that almost smile again. No, you do fire in disguise. Before I could answer, the lights flickered. A second later, the entire floor shuddered with a sound like thunder ripping the ground apart. The explosion hit from below. Luca slammed through the door, shouting something I couldn't hear over the roar. Dante grabbed my wrist, dragging me down as glass burst inward from the windows. Heat, smoke, chaos. My ears rang. Everything was a blur of firelight and panic. Get down, someone yelled. I was already there, coughing, dust in my throat, my knees against shattered tile. Dante's hand stayed clamped around mine like a lifeline. He pulled me toward the corridor, half dragging, half guiding as alarms blared. We stumbled into a safer room, a library, tall shelves looming like watchmen. Dante slammed the door shut and pressed his back to it, breathing hard. "You okay?" he asked, scanning me for injuries. I coughed again. "I've had better dates." "Stay here." "No." "Area." I said no. If that blast was Mateo, he's not stopping. "You'll need eyes. And I'm not one of your soldiers. You don't get to lock me away." For a second, I thought he'd argue. Then he gave a low laugh that didn't sound amused. "You really are insane. Takes one to recognize another." We moved through the smoke-filled hall, his gun drawn, my adrenaline burning hotter than fear. Downstairs, the west side of the house was a wreck. Walls cracked, one vehicle overturned. Firelight danced on the marble like a cruel joke. "Mateo wouldn't risk this close a strike," Dante muttered, scanning the smoke for movement. "He's sending a message." "Yeah," I said, coughing, eyes burning from the dust. "And I think we just got it delivered express." He turned to me. The firelight cut across his face, half angel, half monster. And in that instant, I understood why people followed him. Not out of loyalty, but out of gravity. You couldn't look away from something that powerful, even if it burned you. Gunfire snapped in the distance. Short, controlled bursts. Dante moved without hesitation, pressing his back to the wall, signaling for me to stay behind him. I didn't. My instincts had stopped listening to orders the moment I met him. "Stay low," he growled. "I'm not a liability. You're also not bulletproof." Neither was he. But that didn't stop him from walking straight into chaos. He rounded the corner, and I followed. The front hall looked like a war zone. Chandeliers shattered, plaster hanging like smoke. The once perfect house now looked as dangerous as the man who owned it. Luca was by the main stairwell, bleeding from a cut across his temple. "Boss, east side breached. 3 men, maybe more." "Mateo's?" Dante barked. "Definitely. They're moving fast." Dante's expression didn't change. "Kill the lights." The next second, darkness swallowed everything but the glow of fire from the west wing. My heartbeat became the only sound I could trust. I crouched, gripping a fallen piece of metal like a weapon. Dante's silhouette moved ahead. Silent, lethal, confident. I'd never seen someone so at home in violence. Shots rang again. Closer this time. I ducked behind a column as Dante fired back, quick and precise. A body fell somewhere near the corridor. My pulse roared in my ears. When the last echo faded, Dante turned toward me, eyes glinting silver in the dim. "You still think I breathe fear?" I swallowed hard. "No, you inhale it," he almost smiled. "Good, then you're starting to understand." The world outside the house had gone quiet. Too quiet. He motioned for me to follow, and we stepped into the open courtyard. The air smelled of gunpowder and smoke. Flames licked at the edges of an overturned SUV. Somewhere beyond the wall, tires screeched. A car speeding away. "Mateo," Dante muttered. "He sent a small team to distract me." "For what?" I asked. If this was just a warning... Before I could finish, Luca stumbled out from the hall, holding a small device. "Found this near the east wing. Timer's off, but it was live. A second bomb." Dante's jaw tightened. "He wanted to level the place." "Then why didn't he?" "Because he wanted me to see it coming." The realization hit both of us at once. Mateo didn't care about killing Dante quickly. He wanted to tear everything apart piece by piece, including me. I stared at the device. Its wires cut, the digital screen cracked. "So I'm leverage." "You said that before. You're also a target now," Dante said. "Which means you don't get to argue when I say you stay close." "Close how close?" He didn't answer with words. He reached for my hand, pulling me toward the waiting car. His grip was firm, not cruel, but final. The kind of touch that said escape wasn't an option anymore. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to escape. We sped into the night. The city blurred past in streaks of gold and shadow. My chest still buzzed with leftover adrenaline. But underneath it was something else. Something that felt a lot like fascination, and that scared me more than the explosion. Dante's knuckles were white on the wheel. "Mateo won't stop," he said quietly. "Not until he's taken everything I built. Then why not run?" His gaze flicked to me. "Because I don't run. And neither do you." He was right. For all my talk of defiance, I hadn't run either. Maybe because something in him mirrored something in me, the hunger to control chaos instead of fleeing from it. We reached another property, smaller, tucked into the hills outside the city. No guards this time, just silence and moonlight. "This place is off record," he said, parking near a stone archway. "Mateo won't find us here." He turned off the engine, and suddenly the night felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies everything. The sound of breathing, the scrape of fabric, the weight of what hadn't been said. "I don't need protection," I whispered. He leaned back, studying me. "You keep saying that like it'll make it true." "I mean it. I know." He paused. "That's what makes it dangerous." I opened my mouth to retort, but he reached out, slow, deliberate, and brushed a strand of ash from my cheek. My breath hitched before I could stop it. There was no arrogance in the gesture, no demand. Just quiet focus, the kind of intimacy that didn't need words. "Fire suits you." he said softly. Because I survived it. Because you didn't run from it. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The night hummed between us, charged and impossible. I could see the bruised purple under his eyes, the tension that held him together. For all his control, he looked one step from falling apart, and I hated that I wanted to know what he'd look like if he did. Then he stood, breaking the moment. Inside, we regroup, then plan. I followed him into the safe house. It was stripped down. Steel, concrete, no luxury. Just function. Still, he lit a single lamp near the table, and the golden light spilled across his face, softening the edges of the monster I'd seen. What now? I asked. Now, he said, pouring whiskey into 2 glasses. We wait for Mateo to make his next move. I took the glass. And when he does? Then we burn his world down before he burns mine. The toast clinked quietly, sharp and certain. I didn't realize until that moment that he'd said we, and maybe I should have been terrified. But instead, I smiled, because something deep inside me already knew. The fire outside wasn't the dangerous one. The one between us was. The safe house smelled of concrete, wet earth, and the faint, stubborn tang of last night's smoke. It had the honesty of a place built for use, not for show. Metal chairs bolted to floors, a bare mattress, maps thumbtacked to walls with routes circled in frantic pen. It felt like truth stripped to bone. I liked that. It told me the men who ran this life didn't waste time on appearances. Dante moved through the room like he owned the angles of it. Because he did. He flicked on a lamp, and the light cut across his face in sharp planes. For a moment, I watched him from the doorway and let myself catalog him like a reporter who'd stopped pretending curiosity wasn't a weapon. The jag of a scar at his temple, the way his jaw tightened when he thought. The same eyes, cold, wry, but with a steady burn under the surface. He looked less like a story and more like a weather system you could only survive by learning its moods. You'll sleep here, he said, pointing at the mattress. Luca had already claimed the chair, eyes never still, listening for the next danger. I'll take first watch. Nope, I said, dropping my bag on the floor. You dragged me into this. You can't order me around and expect me to be quiet about it. He didn't look offended. He looked almost amused. Noted. You do realize that sleeping with your enemy's daughter is a terrible metaphor? I added, because my mouth insisted on being dangerous when my insides wanted to be quiet. He paused at the map, leaning over a red circle where Mateo's men had hit. Your metaphors are atrocious, he said. Then softer, but effective. I sat on the mattress and ran my fingers along the seam. The world had narrowed to this small room, this man, and the hum under my skin that had stopped being simple fear. I had always prided myself on keeping my head. Now my thoughts were a messy tangle that wanted, ridiculously, to stay. Luca came in with 2 steaming cups of something that tasted like burnt coffee, and better than any coffee I'd had in years. Eat, he said. You'll think better with a full stomach. I bit into bread like a woman who'd learned hunger wasn't always physical. Dante watched me. Not intrusively, more like someone measuring the distance of the ocean before he dove in. Finally, he sat opposite me and folded his hands on his knee. Tell me about Mateo, I said. He was quiet a long time before answering. I could hear the clink of a spoon against enamel as Luca left us with the lamp's pool of light. When he spoke, his voice had the weight of a man reciting a verdict rather than a history lesson. He used to be the type who kept a family business, he said. Then greed and paranoia ate him. He decided that if he couldn't have what I built, he'd take the next best thing. Everything I loved. Everything I made into power. And your father? I asked. The name flinched across him like a current. He's gone, Dante said flatly. Mateo had a hand in that. It's why I don't sleep without one eye open. It's why I don't trust the dark. You and your brother. What happened? I pressed. Journalistic reflex. I wanted the timeline, the motive, the fracture. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. For the first time, the veneer slipped, and something raw showed. A man who'd been cut deep and kept walking anyway. We were supposed to be partners. Then he started making deals behind my back. Then he started testing boundaries. Then he tried to move on to things that left blood in the streets. I stopped him. He resented me for it. Resentment curdles into hate. Hate becomes a business plan. Sounds tidy when you say it. My voice was half bitter, half awed. You make it sound like a script. It isn't tidy, he said. It's a chain of little deaths. Every betrayal is a small funeral. He said it so simply that I wanted to slap him for being so readable. People worked hard to look dangerous and opaque. Here was a man who'd let his damage be plain. It made him unbearably human in a way that made my chest ache. So why keep me alive? I asked. Why not cut me loose and let whatever comes come? He turned to me then, and the lamp caught his profile. Strong lines, haunted eyes. Because you're not collateral. You're a variable I don't like being ignorant about. He met my gaze full and unblinking. Because someone thought you were a way to reach me. Because now they will keep trying. And because, I pushed. I needed the truth to be whole. Even if it hurt, he breathed out, slow, something like a weight easing. And because you're the first woman in a long time who looked at me like I was mortal instead of a ghost on a throne. The words were half confession, half accusation. I felt heat where his hand might have been on my wrist if he'd reached for me. Instead, he folded his fingers back into his palms like a man who'd practiced restraint. "That's not flattering," I said. "No," he said. "It's accurate." There was a silence. Not the empty, polite thing, but the kind that builds a trench between two people where history can be buried or shared. I found myself wanting to crawl into that trench and lie down next to him, which was absurd and terrifying. "I am not the sort who cedes ground. You were always like this?" I asked suddenly. "Cold, precise?" He let out a short laugh that had no humor. "I was warm once. Quick to anger, quicker to forgive. Then they taught me that soft spots are where knives go in. You earn the knives. And you," he countered, "earn more than knives. You earn curiosity, and curiosity gets people killed." I snapped back, sharper than I intended. Maybe that's true. Or maybe curiosity is what saves people. They don't find the rot unless someone points the light. He watched me with a look I couldn't name. Something that folded admiration and worry into a single, heavy thing. Up close, his features were a map of lines and contradictions. "You're reckless," he said. "I prefer brave." I shot back. He leaned forward, the movement small enough to seem casual and huge enough to be a crossing of a line. Now he was close enough for me to feel the air that moved with him, to notice the warmth at his collarbone, the dry scent of cologne and smoke. He didn't touch me, but his proximity had the intimacy of a confession. "I don't know if I want to protect you," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Or if I want to destroy what you represent." The words landed like an ember. Not a threat exactly, more a truth so jagged it could become either a promise or an end. My breath hitched. I should have met it with anger, with a flint of fight. Instead, something soft and honest unfurled inside me. "What do you mean?" I asked. I had to ask. "Because knowledge is a weapon, and weapons are how I've always survived." He closed his eyes for a split second, then opened them and looked at me like he'd decided to hand me a piece of himself. "You remind me of what I used to be, the part of me that would risk everything for a truth. That part is dangerous to the life I built. If I protect you, I'm admitting I care. If I destroy you, I'm admitting you can hurt me. Neither is safe," I swallowed. The thickness in my throat had nothing to do with smoke or whiskey. It was the feeling you get when the map of your life redraws itself in one conversation. "So what now?" I asked. He let the question hang, then stood. "Now we prepare. Mateo will try again. He always does. We fortify. We gather intelligence, and you," he paused, meeting my eyes in a way that made the air between us taut. "You learn to fight like you live." I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "You want me to be a soldier. I want you to be a weapon that you can wield," he corrected, "not one that cuts you." I looked at him, at the man who could crush a room with a glance, and yet spoke as if he might break like glass. "Fine," I said. "Teach me." He nodded once, the motion small and strange as a blessing. "Good," he said. "First lesson, know the shape of your fear. Second lesson, learn to make it obey." He stepped closer again, so near I could see the tiny tremor at the corner of his mouth. The space between desire and danger blurred until I could hardly tell which was which. "You still have time to leave," he murmured, "and you still have time to stop wanting to claim me." I shot back. His fingertips brushed my hand, a whisper of contact that was impossible to ignore. "I don't know if I want to protect you or destroy you," he repeated, softer this time, as if saying it aloud might make the truth less sharp. I met his gaze, steady and fiercely alive. "Then choose," I said. "Decide. Because if you don't, I will." He smiled then, not the cruel, confident thing from the first day, but a small, dark thing that promised war. "Good," he said. "I like when people make choices, and for the first time in days, I slept without nightmares. Not because I felt safe, but because I knew I was part of something that would neither let me fall, nor pretend I didn't fight back. He taught me to hold a pistol like it was a secret that could split your life in two. It seems ridiculous in the daylight now, the way my fingers trembled the first time he put a cold steel weight into my hand, teaching me to breathe with the weapon, to become an extension of my own will. Luca had laid out targets on the concrete, old cans, a torn cardboard silhouette, and Dante stood beside me with the patience of someone who'd waited decades for an apprentice who wouldn't flinch. His shadow fell across the range like a promise. "Your index finger," he said, voice low and precise, "stays off the trigger until you decide the world ends." He moved my hand an inch, corrected the angle of my grip, the turn of my wrist. Close enough that I felt the warmth of his arm against mine, close enough that the air between us hummed. "You shoot like you write," he added after a beat. And there it was. The reporter in me reflected back as an assessment. Calm, intentional. "Don't let the gun discover your panic. Don't make me philosophical while I'm trying not to explode," I muttered, but I kept my hand steady. The weight of the weapon anchored something in my core. I liked that steadiness. I needed it. He stepped back to give me room but didn't move far. The range was a rectangle of light in a place otherwise mapped in shadow. The targets lined up, and I drew the first breath he taught me. Slow in, hold, aim, release, and the shot was clean, perfect. The can toppling in a small, satisfying surrender. I smiled, stupid and triumphant. Dante's mouth twitched. Good, he said. Again, we did it until the dusk bled into a thin blue night. The air tasted of metal and old leaves. Teaching became something else. An insinuation of intimacy wrapped in instruction. It was easier, in a strange way, to learn from the man who terrorized a city than it had ever been to learn from anybody else. Maybe because the stakes he taught me to accept were absolute. When we finally stopped, sweat cooling on my skin, he didn't congratulate me the way a mentor might. He watched, quiet and deliberate, like a man measuring the exact moment he wanted to cross a boundary. Something in his jaw softened. I felt exposed in a way the live rounds never allowed. Raw, human, unarmored. You're reckless, he said. But the hardness was gone. I prefer brave, I said. And it was a dare and a declaration both. He stepped closer. The world narrowing to the distance between our chests. His hand hovered near mine, then went to the gun belt at his hip. Not to his weapon, but to the leather strap. A small domestic gesture. Absurdly intimate in the context of concrete and gunpowder. You could have died today, he said. So could you. That's the job. He tilted his head. But you chose to stay. That means something, does it? I wanted to snarl back with sarcasm, but something in his steadiness hollowed out the space for retort. You said you don't know if you want to protect me or destroy me. I did. His voice dropped to a register that made my spine unlock in places I'd kept nailed shut. I still don't know. The confession was as brutal as a wound. For someone who'd stepped out of shadows and into my life like an earthquake, he could be startlingly honest. I took a step toward him. Impulsive, stubborn, defiant. Decide. He closed the distance then, not violently, not with the consumption of a predator, but with an urgent, precise motion like a man striking the match on a stormy night. His hand found the side of my face, fingers warm, thumb brushing my cheekbone with the softness of someone rehearsing a touch they weren't supposed to allow. He looked at me like he'd been trying to memorize me from the moment I'd stumbled into his bed. The intensity rooted me where I stood. The kiss was not a retreat into softness. It was an assertion, sharp and fierce and compact, like two people staking ground with tongue and teeth and breath. It wasn't tender in the way I expected when I thought of kisses. It was strategic. There was hunger there, yes, but it was braided tightly with challenge. Prove you can keep up. Prove you won't bend. Prove you aren't another casualty to be mourned later. I kissed back with all the force of my stubbornness, and for a dizzying second the world narrowed to the two of us, two flames that might consume each other if careless. My hands found his chest, against the black fabric of his shirt, over the steady thrum of his heart, and I felt something inside me rearrange. If he had been a problem earlier, he was now a shared weapon. We broke apart because the house chose that moment to erupt. A shot cracked like thunder. The sound was close enough to rattle the windows. Someone screamed. The kiss shattered on the air between us, replaced by the immediacy of danger. We moved like two halves of a single trained animal. Dante reaching for his gun, me slipping my palm inside my jacket where I'd learned to keep a compact. Everything a muscle memory we'd been building for nights like this. Get down, he barked, and his voice snapped the air into orders. We were doubled behind a concrete bollard as footsteps pounded the corridor. A coordinated, practiced advance. Mateo's men. The training room had become a theater of war in an instant. The targets replaced by men in jackets, and the lights flashing like alarms. I aimed, hands steady despite adrenaline pounding like kettle drums. A figure appeared at the doorway, shadowed, gun raised. I fired twice. The second shot found steel where it mattered, and the man slumped. The hit registered in my bones as cold and definitive. Dante moved like I'd seen him move. Efficient, merciless, an entire life condensed into lethal gestures. He was beside me in a blur, a guardian who had chosen, in the breath between our kiss and the first gunshot, to be something other than the myth people whispered. He covered my flank with the kind of attentiveness I'd never admitted I craved. We were a unit, brief and fractured and honest. He shouted orders, Luca answered. Men fell, one by one, the noise of battle painting the room with urgency. I ducked behind cover and returned fire, each pull of the trigger a punctuation on the sentence life had forced me to write. At one point, while the world detonated around us, Dante's hand brushed mine, just the briefest touch, and it steadied me as surely as any grip on a rope. When the last man went down, the silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Smoke curled along the ceiling like a lazy ghost. The floor was littered with spent casings and a mess of ruined dignity. You okay? Dante asked, voice raw in a way that made me feel both mortal and seen. I wiped sweat and ash from my brow and let out a laugh that was half adrenaline and half disbelief. I shot a man. That's new for Tuesday. He didn't laugh. He just looked at me, really looked, like someone trying to decide if the thing he'd found was salvageable or too dangerous to keep. Then he stepped closer, hand reaching out not for a weapon but for me. His fingers brushed my jaw, gentle and sure. The moment throbbed with all the words we hadn't learned to say. You didn't break, he murmured. I don't break, I echoed, and the words tasted like promise and challenge both. He leaned in then, Not for a kiss, but for something that felt like a vow. His forehead pressed to mine, breath warm against my skin. Good, he whispered, because I don't either. We stood that way for a long minute. Two people who'd survived the bullet and the blaze and decided in the quiet after the storm to stay. Outside, the city breathed on, indifferent or complicit. Inside, we had found a new kind of truce, one made of gunpowder, risk, and a kiss that had changed the geometry of us. When he finally stepped back, his eyes were a dangerous, glorious thing. You bleed easy, he said. Only for dramatic effect, I replied. He allowed a small, dangerous smile. Then let's make sure the world keeps giving you reasons. And in that promise, threat or protection, I couldn't yet tell. I found the only thing I knew I wanted, to be unafraid with him beside me. The house smelled of iron and smoke for days after the attack. Even with the windows shattered and every servant scrubbing at dawn, that scent lingered. Like the ghosts of the men who had fallen refused to leave. Luca said 3 of Dante's people didn't make it. I didn't ask their names. The way he said it was enough. In their world, names were heavy things, used only when they could no longer hurt anyone. I found Dante in his office the next morning, seated behind the same mahogany desk that had survived more wars than I wanted to know about. He was writing something by hand, pen gliding across a yellowed sheet. There was a glass of untouched whiskey beside him, light refracting through amber. He didn't look up until I said, "You should get some sleep." He smiled without humor. "I did, 10 minutes ago. For maybe 15 seconds. You're bleeding," I said, noticing the dark stain along his sleeve. Just a graze. He went back to writing. "I've had worse paper cuts. Paper doesn't shoot back. Depends who's writing." I crossed the room, ignoring his glare, and pulled the first aid kit from the drawer I'd seen Luca use earlier. I set it down with more force than necessary. "You'll let me patch that up. Or I'll do it while you talk about vengeance. Either way, it's happening." He looked at me then. Really looked. And something shifted behind his eyes. Resignation, maybe. Or curiosity. He leaned back in his chair, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a shallow cut across his forearm, streaked with dried blood and soot. "Careful," he murmured. "You might start looking like you care. I just don't want your arm falling off before I get my story." Liar. Maybe. Our gazes met, steady and unblinking. The air between us was full of static, the kind that comes before a storm. I could feel it in my fingertips as I dabbed at the wound. His pulse was steady, unflinching. Even as I pressed gauze against the split skin. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "I've had to be. Who taught you?" "Life." I taped the bandage and sat back exhaling, and a few terrible choices. He nodded like that was an answer he respected. Then he lifted his pen again and gestured at the papers on the desk. "Matteo sent a message last night." "What kind of message?" "A burned truck with one of my insignias carved into the hood. Subtle. That's family for you." He stood then, the movement fluid and full of intent. "He thinks this will break me. It won't. It'll just make me rewrite the rules." "Meaning what?" "Meaning I'm done playing defense." His hand brushed the edge of the desk, where a silver lighter sat next to a folded photograph. 2 boys in matching suits, maybe 10 years old, one smiling wide, the other solemn and already dangerous. I didn't need to ask which was which. "Is that him?" I asked. "Yes, you were close. We were everything." His voice went quieter, like the memory itself was too heavy to speak aloud. And then one of us decided to destroy the other. "Family business?" He looked up, eyes sharp. "No, family betrayal." I wanted to ask more, but the knock at the door stopped me. Luca entered, looking grimmer than usual. "Boss?" he said. "We found Matteo's mole. Inside." Dante straightened, the shift immediate. Gentle grief replaced by lethal focus. "Where?" "Basement. She's asking for you." "She?" I asked, before I could stop myself. Luca nodded. "Said her name's Nina." My stomach twisted. "I know that name." Dante glanced at me. "Who is she?" "She's a journalist. Used to work the same beat I did. Vanished last year after exposing a senator's offshore accounts." I swallowed hard. "I thought she was dead." "She might be soon," Dante said, already heading for the door. "Wait." I followed, ignoring Luca's raised brow. If she's really a reporter, she might have been forced into this. "Let me talk to her. She planted explosives under my roof. She doesn't deserve conversation." "Then consider it interrogation." He didn't answer, just kept walking. His silence was its own verdict. The basement was colder than the rest of the house, the air thick with mildew and tension. Nina sat on a chair in the center of the room, wrists bound, face pale beneath a cascade of dirt and sweat. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes widened. "Arya." "Nina, you shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They'll kill you too." Dante stepped closer, expression carved from stone. "Not if she tells me why Matteo wanted my house in ashes." Nina trembled, eyes darting between us. "You don't understand. He's not just after you. He's after her." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "He knows who you are, Arya. Who your father was." I froze. "My father died when I was a kid." Nina shook her head. "He didn't. He changed his name. He was one of them. part of the Rossi family before he disappeared. Matteo thinks you're leverage. He's coming for you, not him. The room tilted for a second. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Dante's gaze turned toward me, assessing, unreadable, but sharper now, like every puzzle piece had just rearranged. You're Rossi blood? He said quietly. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. He exhaled, a low, dangerous sound. That's why Matteo wanted you alive. You're the perfect bait. Nina nodded weakly. He'll come tonight. He wants her delivered. Dante turned, voice like ice over fire. Then let him come. He pulled his gun from its holster and slid a new magazine in with a click that sounded like destiny snapping shut. I looked at him and saw something raw flicker behind the calm. This wasn't just war anymore. This was personal. And somehow, without ever meaning to, I had become the center of it. He stepped closer until our faces were inches apart. From now on, he said, you don't leave my sight. Protection or imprisonment. Survival. And with that word, everything changed. The storm rolled in without thunder. It came quiet, like the air itself was waiting to see who would break first. By midnight, every hallway in the mansion glowed under emergency light. The guards whispered in Italian, their movements sharp and urgent. You could taste the fear beneath the discipline, the metallic hum of anticipation before violence. Dante stood in the center of it all like a fixed point in chaos, coat thrown over his shoulders, gun holster visible, eyes like sharpened glass. He was no longer the man who kissed me between gunfire. He was the legend people prayed not to meet. But when he turned to me, that edge softened, barely. Stay close, I told you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I don't hide. He stepped closer, his shadow wrapping over mine. And I told you, I don't lose what's mine. That word, mine, landed like a spark in dry wood. I didn't belong to anyone, but for one dangerous second, I wanted to believe I could belong somewhere, to something, to someone who would burn down the world to keep me safe. Then I shoved that thought away and checked my pistol. Let's focus on Matteo, not semantics. He almost smiled. Fair enough. We made our way toward the East Wing. His command center now. Luca was waiting there, maps spread out, radios buzzing with coded chatter. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the sound of distant engines. They're moving, Luca said grimly. 2 vans, south entrance. Matteo doesn't waste time, Dante replied. We meet them before they breach. I looked at him. Meet them? As in, out there? He nodded. If we wait, we fight on our own ground. Too many blind corners. Or, I said, we use that to our advantage. He raised a brow. I leaned over the table, tracing a path across the blueprint. If they come through the south, you hit the power. Let them think they've got surprise. Then take them from both sides. Ambush in the dark. For a second, no one spoke. Then Dante laughed softly. Low, rough, genuine. You'd make a good strategist. Guess journalism wasn't my only calling. He looked at me like he wanted to say more, but the radio crackled again, an urgent voice announcing movement at the perimeter. The time for words evaporated. We moved fast, down staircases, through steel doors, into the heart of the storm. The night outside was thick with mist and gasoline, the driveway slick like polished obsidian. I caught the faint reflection of headlights beyond the gate. 2 vans, just as Luca had said. Dante gave a hand signal, and his men spread like phantoms. I pressed myself against a column, pistol ready, heart hammering so loud I thought it would betray us. Then, silence broke. A flash, a roar. The first van exploded, a bloom of fire tearing the dark in half. The second skidded sideways, men spilling out, guns drawn. The air filled with noise, shouts, bullets, death in motion. I moved on instinct, firing toward the shadows. Every muscle screamed, every sense sharpened. Dante's orders cut through the chaos like a blade, calm and lethal. He fought like a man who didn't believe in hesitation. Every movement clean, final. At one point, someone lunged at him from behind. I didn't think. I fired. The man dropped, and Dante turned, eyes locking on mine. Nice aim, he shouted over the gunfire. You're welcome, I yelled back. We fought like that, back to back, 2 storms colliding and somehow creating a strange kind of balance. When it was over, the night was on fire, bodies and wreckage scattered like a warning to the world. This was Dante De Luca's domain, and trespassers bled for it. I lowered my gun, chest heaving. The silence that followed was almost cruel in its finality. Luca approached, limping, his face streaked with dirt. We got one alive. Dante's expression hardened. Bring him. They dragged a man forward, Matteo's insignia inked on his neck, blood running from a cut above his brow. He spat at Dante's feet. You think this ends here? Dante crouched, voice low, dangerous. It ends when I say it does. Where's Matteo? The man laughed, a harsh broken sound. Closer than you think. And then he bit something. A capsule. His body seized, went still. Cyanide. I flinched, bile rising in my throat. He killed himself. They always do, Dante said flatly. Loyalty through death, or fear, I whispered. He looked at me then, eyes sharp but unreadable. Fear is a kind of loyalty. The wind picked up again, scattering ash through the air. Somewhere behind us, the house burned quietly. One more scar in a night full of them. Dante turned toward me, his coat flaring slightly in the breeze. You understand now why you can't walk away. I understand that your world is a cage. And yet you're still here. I met his gaze. Maybe I'm just not done asking questions. He stepped close again, too close, and brushed a strand of hair from my face with the back of his gloved hand. Keep asking, he murmured. Just be ready when you don't like the answers. Before I could respond, Luca's radio crackled again. Urgent, panicked, boss, we found something. East corridor, you need to see this. We followed him inside, the smell of burnt oil trailing us. There, on the marble floor near the shattered door, someone had scrawled words in red. Spray paint or blood. It didn't matter. Family always finds its way home. Below it, an envelope, sealed in black wax. Dante picked it up slowly, jaw tightening as he broke the seal. Inside was a single photograph, Matteo, standing in front of a grave. My grave. The date carved on the tombstone was 2 days from now. My blood went cold. Dante's voice dropped to a whisper that cut through the silence like a promise. He's not coming for war anymore. He's coming for prophecy. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just vengeance. This was destiny catching up with both of us. The picture wouldn't leave my hands. It didn't even feel like paper anymore. It felt like skin, alive with some pulsing, invisible thread connecting it to a truth neither of us wanted to speak aloud. My grave. 2 days from now. Dante hadn't moved since he read it. His fingers rested on the edge of the photo, jaw set tight enough to break. The air between us hummed like the aftershock of something ancient and cruel. Finally, he said, he's escalating. He's predicting. I countered. He thinks he knows how this ends. Dante looked at me, slowly, dangerously. He doesn't get to write our ending. There was steel in his tone, but something else too, a shadow of fear. The kind that comes only when the unthinkable feels possible. I folded the photograph, slipped it into my jacket. If Matteo thinks I'm the weakness in your armor, maybe we should let him believe it. Luca, standing a few feet away, turned sharply. Boss, no, that's suicide. Dante didn't look away from me. What are you suggesting? Bait, I said, controlled. Let him come for me. Let him believe he's winning. You use that to end this. His silence was deafening. Then, you're insane. Probably. Matteo will kill you. I stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion etched beneath his defiance. Not if you get to him first. He exhaled, a slow burn of air that felt like surrender. You've been in this world for weeks, Arya. You don't understand what you're asking for. I understand enough, I said. You want him gone. I want my life back. That makes us allies. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other. Two stubborn flames, neither willing to go out first. Then his hand rose, resting on the side of my face, thumb brushing my jaw like a whisper. You make me forget what mercy looks like, he murmured, and you make me remember what danger feels like. He almost smiled. We're a terrible combination. Maybe that's why it works. The storm outside cracked then, thunder rolling low across the horizon, shaking the windows like a warning. By morning, we were already moving. Dante's convoy was stripped down. No flashy cars, no insignias, just shadows on asphalt, slipping through the veins of the city before dawn. Luca drove. I sat beside Dante in the back seat, my nerves a current under my skin. We were headed toward the cemetery in the photo, the one where my name had been carved into stone I hadn't earned. The roads were empty, slick from rain. The world outside blurred past like a fever dream. I tried to steady my breathing, but every time I looked at Dante, I saw the tension tightening his shoulders. He was a man who had faced every kind of death, and this one scared him. Why that place? I asked quietly. It's where my father is buried, he said, eyes on the window. Matteo knows it's sacred ground. He's making this personal. He already did. He looked at me then, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. If anything happens, don't. I cut him off before he could finish. We're not doing the martyr speech. He huffed a sound that might have been a laugh if it weren't so heavy. You really have no sense of self-preservation. Maybe that's why you like me. The car rolled to a stop at the cemetery gates. The world outside was soaked in silver mist, the tombstones rising like broken teeth from the earth. It was quiet. Too quiet. Luca scanned the perimeter through the scope of his rifle. No movement. That's what worries me, Dante said. We stepped out. The cold hit like an open palm. My boots sank slightly into the wet ground, the air heavy with the smell of earth and rain. Dante moved first, his silhouette cutting through the fog, black coat trailing behind him like a specter. I followed, eyes scanning for the gravestone from the photograph, and then I saw it, near the far edge of the cemetery, half hidden beneath an old oak. My name, my birthday, the date 2 days from now carved deep and clean. It didn't look rushed. It looked planned, beautiful even, a mockery made elegant. I walked closer, pulse hammering in my ears. He had this made. He really believes I'll die here. Dante's hand came to rest on my shoulder. He's wrong. A sound cracked through the air. Not thunder. Gunfire. We dove behind the nearest stone, instinct taking over. Dirt exploded beside my hand, fragments of marble slicing through the fog. Snipers, Luca shouted. East Ridge! Dante returned fire, his movements sharp and methodical. I pressed myself low, heart in my throat, the air filled with the whine of bullets and the echo of chaos. But this wasn't random. This was choreography. Matteo's message written in lead and fire. Dante's radio flared. A voice, smooth and venomous, came through the static. Brother. Dante froze. Matteo, did you like my gift? The voice purred. I thought it was poetic. The woman who sleeps in your bed now sleeps in the earth, too. Dante's grip tightened on the radio. You're a coward hiding behind graves, and you're a fool hiding behind love. My breath caught. Matteo laughed, a cold, cutting sound that filled the air like frost. She doesn't even know the half of it, does she? The truth about what you did to our father? The words hit like a blade drawn in the dark. Dante didn't answer. Tell her, Matteo said. Tell her how you really became king. The radio hissed, then went dead. I turned to Dante, the silence between us louder than the gunfire. What did he mean? His eyes, usually steady, unbreakable, looked fractured now. Not here, he said. We move first, but Arya, now. The command snapped through me like electricity. We ran, dodging between headstones, the fog swirling around us like smoke. Luca covered our retreat, bullets cutting through the mist. By the time we reached the car again, I was shaking, not from fear, but from the knowledge that there was something Dante hadn't told me, something that lived in the silence between his heartbeat and his lies. As we sped away from the cemetery, I looked back through the rear window. The fog swallowed the graves, but the image burned behind my eyes, my name carved in stone, waiting, and for the first time, I wasn't sure whether fate or choice was driving anymore. The drive back to the mansion felt endless, the city blurred by in streaks of neon and fog, and I couldn't stop seeing that grave, the precision of the carving, the eerie calm of it, like death had been rehearsed. Mine specifically. Dante didn't speak for the first half hour. He just stared out the window, one hand clenched around the edge of his seat, knuckles white, jaw locked. Even Luca didn't dare interrupt. Finally, I said it. What did Matteo mean back there? What did you do to your father? No answer. I leaned closer, voice low but steady. You can't tell me half a truth and expect me to trust you, Dante. He turned his head, slow and deliberate, eyes sharp but haunted. Trust is a luxury in this life. I stopped affording it years ago. Then maybe that's why you're still fighting ghosts. The car fell into silence again. Then, after a long, deliberate breath, he said, Pull over, Luca. Luca shot him a quick glance in the rearview mirror, but obeyed without question. The car rolled to a stop under an overpass, the hum of the city echoing faintly around us. Dante got out first, his movements taut with the kind of control that only comes from someone holding back too much. I followed, the cold night air biting against my skin. He stood by the concrete railing, rain slicking his hair, the city lights behind him turning him into something mythic and broken at once. You want the truth? He said, voice low but trembling at the edges. Fine. I folded my arms, bracing for impact. My father built the De Luca empire from blood and betrayal. He taught us, Matteo and me, that loyalty was survival. He also taught us fear. Every punishment was a lesson. Every lie a weapon. Matteo was his favorite. The heir. I was the weapon. He looked away, eyes reflecting the glow of a passing car. The night it ended, my father ordered me to kill someone, a woman who betrayed him. She was pregnant. I didn't know who she was. I refused. My breath caught. He said if I didn't do it, Matteo would. So I stopped him. But in stopping him, I killed our father instead. The confession landed between us like thunder that refused to fade. I took a step closer. He made you choose. He always did. His voice cracked on the edges of the words. Matteo watched it happen. And in that moment, I became the monster he spent the rest of his life hunting. The rain hit harder now, drumming against the concrete. Dante didn't flinch. You think I don't know what I am, Arya? I took a life, our father's, and built an empire on the guilt of it. Matteo took what was left of his humanity and burned it just to spite me. That's what this war is about. Not money, not power, just a brother who wants to rewrite history. I stepped closer until I was standing right in front of him, the storm washing over us both. And where do I fit into this? You were never supposed to. But I did. His hand rose, hovering just above my cheek but not touching. You're not a pawn. You're the only thing that doesn't belong in this story. And that's exactly why Matteo wants to erase you. Because if you survive, it means maybe I can too. The words were almost drowned by the sound of rain. But I heard them, felt them. They were the closest thing to a confession of love I'd ever heard from a man who'd forgotten what love sounded like. I reached out and caught his wrist before he could pull away. You don't get to decide what saves you, Dante. You just get to decide what kind of man you are when the world catches up. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then something broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet surrender. He stepped forward, pressing his forehead against mine. You should hate me, he whispered. I don't, I said, my voice shaking. I just don't want to watch you drown in someone else's sins. The silence after that was thick, trembling, alive with everything we couldn't say. The air between us was electric but fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Then the sound of an engine cut through the stillness. Headlights flooded the underpass, too bright, too fast. Luca shouted, "Boss, move!" Dante spun just as the first bullet hit the wall beside us. Another grazed his shoulder. Instinct took over. He pushed me down behind a concrete pillar, his body shielding mine as sparks burst from the impact above us. "Matteo's men," Luca yelled, firing back. The world exploded into motion. Tires screeched. Bullets ricocheted. Dante's hand found mine, dragging me toward the car as he returned fire with his other. Every shot was a punctuation mark on a confession not yet finished. We dove inside the car. The glass shattered around us as Luca slammed the gas pedal down. The city roared to life and chaos again. Streets blurring, rain streaking the windows. The night chasing us like vengeance incarnate. Dante's shoulder was bleeding, but his eyes burned bright, alive. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "He's not going to stop until one of us is gone. Then we make sure it's not us," I said. And for the first time, he smiled, a wild, broken thing that made the storm outside seem almost gentle. The car vanished into the rain, carrying us toward a reckoning that had been waiting for years. But for the first time, I wasn't running away from it. I was running with him. The safe house was buried deep in the industrial outskirts of the city, an old steel warehouse that smelled of rust and forgotten wars. Luca secured the gates while Dante and I slipped inside. The hum of generators echoed against metal walls, and somewhere in the shadows, the ghosts of his empire whispered like echoes through iron. Dante's shirt was torn, blood blooming across his shoulder. "It's nothing," he said when I reached for him. "It's not nothing," I snapped. "Sit." He gave me a look that was equal parts defiance and fatigue, but he sat anyway. I tore open a first aid kit, hand steady even though my pulse wasn't. He winced when I pressed gauze against the wound. "You're lucky it just grazed you," I murmured. "A little to the left and—" "I don't need a lecture," he muttered. "Good, because this isn't one." I met his gaze unflinching. "It's a reminder that you're not invincible." Something in his expression shifted, softening just for a second before the steel returned. "And you're not bulletproof either, Arya. You shouldn't have been there." "I chose to be there," I said, tightening the bandage. "Stop treating me like a liability. You think being the Mafia's favorite ghost makes you untouchable? You bleed like the rest of us." His jaw clenched, but then slowly, a faint crooked smile appeared. "You're terrifying when you're angry." "Good," I said, standing. "Maybe you'll finally listen." The generators hummed louder. Rain drummed against the roof, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. The city felt like it was holding its breath. Luca returned, wiping rain from his face. "We've got a problem." 2 of Matteo's cars were spotted near the docks. "They're circling. They know where we are." Dante's composure returned in an instant. "How long until they move?" "Could be an hour. Maybe less." He turned to me. "You stay in the back room." I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "You really don't learn." "Arya, no." I stepped closer, eyes locked on his. "You're bleeding, exhausted, and about to face a man who's made it his life's mission to destroy you. You need me." He stared at me for a beat, then gave a quiet, frustrated sigh. "You're impossible, and you like that about me. I should have locked you in that hotel room when I had the chance. You tried, remember?" That earned a half smirk before the darkness swallowed it again. Dante loaded his gun, the click echoing like thunder. "Luca, seal the exits. We end this tonight." The plan unfolded in silence. Quick, surgical, terrifying. We moved through the warehouse like shadows. The air was electric with anticipation, heavy with the metallic scent of rain and oil. Then, the sound came. A low growl of engines outside. Luca glanced at Dante. "They're here." The lights flickered once, twice, and died. Darkness swallowed everything. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then the first explosion shattered the night. The east wall erupted, sending smoke and debris cascading through the air. I hit the ground, ears ringing, as gunfire split the silence. "Arya!" Dante's voice cut through the chaos. He pulled me behind a steel beam just as bullets tore through the air where I'd been standing. The flashes illuminated his face in fragments. Rage, fear, command. "Stay with me," he said, eyes locking onto mine. "I'm not going anywhere." He handed me a pistol. "You remember how to use it?" I gave him a look. "You taught me, didn't you?" That made him grin, just for a second, before the storm claimed him again. He rose, fired, ducked back, moved like smoke through the chaos. Every movement was controlled violence, every breath a vow. Luca's voice came through the static of the radio. "They're breaching the north side. There's too many." The transmission cut out with a burst of static. Dante cursed. "We move." We slipped through the corridors, the air thick with smoke. The whole building trembled under the force of the assault. I could hear Matteo's men shouting orders, Italian curses and commands echoing through the hallways like a hymn of war. Then, I saw him, Matteo. He stepped through the smoke like a vision conjured from hell, dressed in black, his eyes cold and sharp as glass. "Brother," he called, voice slicing through the chaos. "Still hiding behind women, I see." Dante froze. "Still mistaking obsession for justice." Matteo laughed, low and venomous. "You stole everything from me. The throne, the family, even fate itself. And now you think you can rewrite what you destroyed?" "This ends tonight," Dante said, gun steady. "No more graves. No more ghosts. On that, at least," Matteo said, raising his weapon. "We agree." The world exploded again. Gunfire. Smoke. The sharp metallic taste of adrenaline. I ducked behind cover, heart pounding. And when I rose again, Dante and Matteo were locked in their own orbit, each shot a memory, each move a confession. A bullet grazed my arm. Pain flared, white hot, but I didn't stop. I fired back, taking down one of Matteo's men who was creeping toward Dante's blind side. He looked back at me then, just for an instant, and something raw passed between us. Pride, fear, the silent knowledge that we were both far past the point of turning back. Then Matteo lunged, and they crashed into each other, a blur of fists and fury. Years of hatred and guilt collided in a single violent heartbeat. The sound of it was unbearable, the thud of impact, the ragged breath of two brothers who had already lost everything. I moved closer, every instinct screaming to stay away. But then Dante stumbled, Matteo's knife flashing. I didn't think. I just moved. The shot I fired cracked through the air. Sharp. Final. Matteo froze, surprise flickering across his face as he looked down at the wound blooming crimson across his chest. He fell to his knees, eyes locked on his brother. "You let her finish it," he rasped. Then he collapsed. Silence followed. A suffocating, heavy silence broken only by the sound of rain seeping through the shattered ceiling. Dante just stood there, breathing hard, staring down at the body. His gun slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. "It's over," I said softly. He shook his head. "No, it never ends. It just changes shape." I stepped forward, reaching for him. "Then let it change. For once, let it become something else." He turned, eyes finding mine in the wreckage. There was blood on his face, on his hands, but behind it, something human, fragile, real. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You saved mine first." Outside, dawn began to break, pale and cold. The first light of morning slipped through the ruins, washing over us both. For the first time in what felt like forever, Dante lowered his weapon completely, and when he finally looked at me again, it wasn't as the Mafia king. It was as the man beneath the crown. The sun crawled over the wreckage like it was afraid to touch it. Pale light spilled across the torn steel, the shattered glass, the blood still wet on the concrete. For a long time, no one spoke. The world was too quiet, as if even the city itself was holding its breath, waiting to see who had survived the night. Dante stood among the ruins, his black coat heavy with rain and ash. The smoke curled around him like a crown of ghosts. I watched him from a few feet away, bandaging my arm with a strip of fabric torn from my shirt. The pain grounded me, proof that I was still here, still real. Matteo's body had been taken away by Luca's men hours ago. No one said where, and no one asked. There was a strange reverence in the silence, like the end of an old prayer. Bitter, exhausted, unfinished. Dante hadn't moved much since then. He just stared at the floor where his brother had fallen, his expression unreadable. "You should sit," I said gently. He didn't answer. I crossed the distance between us, the soles of my boots crunching on glass. "You did what you had to." His voice was low, rough. "You sound just like him when you say that." "Matteo?" "No," he said. "My father." The words hung between us, sharp and heavy. He finally looked at me, eyes rimmed red from exhaustion, and something deeper. "Regret. I didn't want this," he said. "Any of it. Not the power, not the empire. I just didn't know how to stop once it started." "You stopped him," I said. "You ended it." He laughed softly, a hollow, broken sound. "That's what everyone thinks when the killing stops. But it never really ends, Arya. It just finds another name to hide behind." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this could be different, but I'd seen enough of his world to know the truth. Nothing ever ended clean. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke and metal. The world outside the warehouse was waking up. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, faint but growing. "We need to go," I said. "Police will come. Reporters. Someone's bound to—" "They won't come here," Dante interrupted. "This part of the city belongs to ghosts." I stared at him for a moment. "And what does that make you?" He smiled faintly, bitterly. "A survivor. For now." Luca approached, his shirt torn and streaked with grime. "Boss, the cars are ready. We can get you both out through the south docks." Dante didn't move. "And the rest of the men?" "They're waiting for orders." There was a pause. Then Dante said, "Tell them it's over." Luca blinked, as if he hadn't heard right. "Over? You heard me. The DeLuca Empire dies here. No more blood." Luca hesitated. "They won't like it." "I don't care," Dante said, his tone final. "If they stay, they're free men. If they leave in peace. I won't build a kingdom out of coffins anymore." For a second, Luca just stared at him, then nodded. Understood. He walked away, leaving us alone again in the wreckage. Dante turned back toward the light spilling through the broken roof. The sun was higher now, slicing through the smoke in golden beams that painted his face with something almost holy. I stepped closer, until I was standing right in front of him. So what happens now? He exhaled, long and slow. Now I disappear. I burn the last of this world behind me and try to figure out if there's anything left worth saving. And me? He looked at me, really looked. His gaze traced the bruises on my arms, the dried blood on my skin, the steadiness in my posture despite it all. You don't belong in this story anymore, Aria. You were the only good thing that walked into the fire and somehow came out whole. You should go before it finds a way to pull you back. Go where? I asked. Back to pretending none of this happened? Back to falling asleep in hotel rooms I don't belong in? His eyes softened. Anywhere but here. The air between us was too full, of everything we'd said. Everything we hadn't. You think walking away makes this easier? I asked quietly. No, he said. It makes it bearable. A part of me wanted to scream at him, to demand that he stop pretending he was poison, that he didn't deserve to live. But another part, the part that had grown sharper, harder, understood, so I nodded. If you disappear, you'd better stay gone. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off his skin. His hand brushed my jaw, slow, reverent, like he was memorizing something he wasn't supposed to touch. You'll hate me for this, he whispered. Probably. He smiled. Small. Sad. Good. Hate keeps people alive. And then he kissed me. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't violent. It was slow, deliberate, like a goodbye written in fire. His hands cupped my face, mine tangled in his shirt, and for a moment, everything outside that breath stopped existing. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. If you ever hear my name again, he murmured, pretend you didn't. And then he walked away. No dramatic exit. No roar of engines or rain-soaked gunfire. Just the soft sound of footsteps fading into sunlight. I stood there until the echoes died, the taste of him still burning on my lips, the silence stretching out like a wound that would never quite close. When I finally stepped outside, the city was awake. Normal, almost absurdly so. Cars passed. Vendors shouted. Life continued, indifferent to the fact that a war had ended while the world slept. I slipped into the crowd and didn't look back, but I carried him with me, the ghost of his voice, the storm of his touch, the promise that even monsters could crave redemption. And though I didn't know it then, that wasn't the end of our story. It was only the silence before the next chapter began. It took months before I saw him again. By then, I had learned how to breathe without checking over my shoulder, how to sleep without expecting to wake in someone else's war. I moved through the world like a survivor pretending to be ordinary. Morning coffee, quiet streets, new city, new name. Yet even in stillness, the ghost of him lingered. Dante DeLuca, the man who had burned his own kingdom to save me. The man I swore I'd never see again. I told myself I'd buried that chapter. But ghosts don't stay buried, do they? They haunt in echoes, in coincidences that feel like fate. That morning, the air smelled like rain again, the kind of thick metallic scent that pulls at old memories. I was walking along the harbor, the sky bruised and heavy above the water, when I heard it, the low hum of an engine that didn't belong to this quiet place. And just like that, the world tilted. He stepped out of a black car that looked too sleek, too dangerous for daylight. The years, or months maybe, but they felt like years, had changed him. The sharp edges were still there, but his eyes had shifted. The rage was gone. In its place was something quieter, heavier. He wasn't the king anymore. He was what came after. Aria, he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a prayer said too late. I should have walked away. Every rational part of me screamed to, but I didn't move. You were supposed to be gone, I said finally. I was. His voice carried that same rough gravity, like thunder after lightning. But ghosts never really stay dead. I folded my arms, masking the storm under my skin. So what are you now? A ghost? He smiled faintly. A man trying to remember what it feels like not to be one. Silence stretched between us, charged and fragile. The wind lifted my hair, and for a moment, it felt like the universe was holding its breath again, just to see what we do. Why are you here? I asked. He looked out toward the sea. Because every time I tried to forget, I saw your face instead. Because I burned down everything I had, and the only thing left worth finding was you. I hated how my heart reacted to that. How it stuttered like it was relearning his name. You think words fix what you did? No, he said quietly. But maybe they're a start. The rain began again, soft at first, then steady. He didn't move. Neither did I. He stepped closer, slow, careful, as if testing the air. When I left, I thought I was saving you from my world. But maybe I was just hiding from what you made me feel. And what's that? I asked, though my voice wasn't as steady as I wanted. Alive, he said. Terrified, human. I let out a small, shaking laugh. That's not love, Dante, that's trauma. He smiled. Sadly, beautifully. Maybe, but it's ours. For a long time I said nothing. The sound of waves crashed against the harbor wall. The rain slicked the cobblestone at our feet. And everything, the noise, the smell, the gravity, pulled me back to that night, the one where the world burned and we chose each other anyway. He reached into his coat, pulled out something small, an old silver lighter, dented and tarnished. He held it out to me. "What's this?" I asked. "The only thing I kept," he said, "from that night. It doesn't light anymore." But I couldn't throw it away. I took it. The metal was cold against my palm. "You're not asking me to come back, are you?" I asked softly. "No." He shook his head. "That world's gone. I buried it for good. Then what are you asking?" He hesitated, then said, "To walk beside you, not as the man who owned you, not as the one who saved you, but as the one who's trying to deserve you." The words shouldn't have made me tremble. But they did. I studied him, really looked at him. There was no throne left in his eyes, no crown made of guilt. Just a man standing in the rain, stripped of everything except the truth. "You know," I said, stepping closer until we were inches apart, "I swore if I ever saw you again, I'd break your jaw." His mouth curved into that same dangerous smile. "I'd deserve it." "Yeah," I said. "You would." I lifted my hand, and for a heartbeat he thought I was going to hit him, but instead I brushed a raindrop from his cheek. He flinched, not from pain, but from the unfamiliarity of gentleness. "I don't forgive you," I whispered. "I don't expect you to, but I'm done running from what happened." "Then maybe," he said, "we can stop running altogether." The storm around us quieted, as if the sky had grown tired of punishing us. The harbor lights flickered on, reflecting off the water like shattered stars. He took my hand, not with the claim of a man who thought he owned me, but with the reverence of someone who had finally learned how to ask. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a mistake. It didn't feel like danger. It felt like survival finding its second breath. As the rain softened into mist, I looked up at him, at the man who had once been a monster, a myth, a name whispered in fear, and now, somehow, just a man. "Guess the Ghost King finally found his peace," I murmured. He smiled faintly. "Only if his queen lets him keep it." I laughed quietly, the sound surprising both of us. We started walking. No destination, no plan. Just the sound of the ocean and the rain and two people who had finally stopped fighting the world long enough to face it, behind us. The city lights burned through the mist like old embers refusing to die. Ahead, the horizon stretched open, wild, uncertain, and for the first time ours.